We're also going live on YouTube. Hello everyone, and welcome to the last episode of Urbanlogue Series 2. I'm just going to wait for one more minute because I can see the attendees numbers rising before we just properly start. So we'll just start in a minute.
YouTube. Are you signing into YouTube?
Yeah, I'm signing into YouTube, but our internet, I think, is the issue.
Which one are you connected to?
Hello everyone, and welcome to the last episode of Urbanlogue Series 2. Through the series, Urbanlogue has inspired cities with dialogue to make public transport COVID safe, reclaim streets for walking and cycling, and shape a green recovery for our country. In our last episode, we empower cities now to initiate the dialogue. The success of COVID safe measures depends entirely on people's awareness, understanding, and support. Adjusting to the new normal will require cities to listen, engage, spread awareness, and build public trust towards new initiatives. And that's what we'll focus on today. On this note, a few housekeeping rules for everyone here. Participants and panelists, feel free to chat and interact with each other in the chat box throughout the discussion. Type your questions, however, in the Q&A box. Our team will shortlist these questions for the Q&A session. And finally, if you like a question, you can also upvote it to bring them to our attention. On that note, I'd like to introduce our moderator and speaker for this episode, Ms. Ashwati Dilip. She's the Senior Program Manager leading Complete Street Strategy, Policy, Project work for ITDP India program. She's been working with national, state, and city governments, providing them technical assistance on sustainable and equitable urban mobility. Over to you, Ashwati.
Thank you, Archana. Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure and honor to welcome each one of you to the very last episode of Urbanlogue Series 2 on effective communication and outreach for sustainable mobility. As Archana mentioned, over the last 5 weeks, we have been together on a journey learning how cities across the country can swiftly develop and implement COVID-safe transport solutions for all our citizens. Here, to reinforce, I'd like to quote the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. He stated on Earth Day that despite the impacts of coronavirus pandemic, the world mustn't forget the deeper environmental emergency facing the planet. The toll taken by the virus is both immediate and dreadful, but the crisis is also a wake-up call to do things right for the future. As our cities now prepare to walk the talk, to leap ahead to implement these interventions for its citizens, by focusing on quick, widespread transformation across our cities, we must not forget that its success will depend on our citizens embracing these interventions, changing decades of behavior. A recent article that I read in The Guardian highlighted that carbon dioxide emissions had plunged by a global average of 17% in April compared with last year, but have since then surged again to within about 5% of last year's levels. So green recovery is imperative, and its success lies in rapid adoption, and rapid adoption requires communicating and building trust of our citizens. Communications and outreach is at the heart of this transformation. First, before we dive into our conversations, I'd like to thank the Smart Cities Mission for their fantastic support throughout this program. Mr. Kunal Kumar, Mr. Rahul Kapoor, Sampath, and the entire team. would also like to take the opportunity to thank our knowledge partners, the World Bank and GIZ Smart SUT. Let me now take the opportunity to introduce you to our remarkable panel. We will start the day with 3 quick presentations that set the context. I will speak about the importance of embracing a green recovery by engaging, persuading, and informing our citizens. Following this, we're delighted to have with us Mr. Shashi Verma, the Director of Strategy and Chief Technology Officer, Transport for London, who will share the steps taken by the City of London. Next, we have Mr. Arun Bothra, IPS, CMD and Managing Director, Capital Region Urban Transport, Truth. Bothra sir, बहुत धन्यवाद for joining us. For the panel discussion, we will be joined by Mr. Kunal Kumar, IAS, Joint Secretary, Smart Cities Mission, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and Ms. Rushta Majid, Country Representative, Bernard Bandier Foundation. And finally, and it is my pleasure to introduce my co-moderator for this session, Mr. Gerald Olivier, Lead Transport Specialist, World Bank. And finally, as this is our closing session, we request all of you to please stay with us to the very end of the session, as we have very special closing remarks by Mr. Kunal Kumar. So without any delay, I'd like to jump straight into the first presentation today. Archana, could you please play the presentation? So today in this presentation, communications and outreach, engaging, persuading, and informing our citizens, I'll very quickly share examples from across the world and the country, focusing on 3 key aspects. Next, informing citizens about all our available mobility choices, persuading and nudging behavior towards sustainable mobility, and engaging with them as cities make plans to implement interventions. Firstly, it's very important for us to inform our citizens about the available mobility choices. So here in the COVID scenario, here is an example of Auckland transportation app in New Zealand, which shows live occupancy data of buses and shows how many more people can board the bus. While Auckland uses the app, as shown in the right, provides information on occupancy of upcoming buses on signboards. While this is an added layer, next slide, cities like London and Singapore provide all the necessary information required for anyone to make an informed travel choice. Here is TfL's trip planner showing several options from PT, walking, cycling, and multiple combinations available to choose from for a citizen. Singapore's transit feed is available through various platforms, including Google Maps, which gives real-time information on all available options. Indian cities could rapidly adopt this by embracing an open data policy. Next, while digital tools are great, we could start with information offline at transit stations and in printed formats. So here is an example of a terminal in our very own Pune with detailed information on all buses plying, their routes, frequency, etc. Next, similarly, pocket guides can also be made available at mobility notes and destination for citizens to pick up. Those who don't have a mobile phone can readily refer these for all the information. Next, as we develop progressive plans, it's very, very important for us to inform our citizens and to also persuade behavioral change. So here is an example from TfL persuading its users to shift from PT and opt walking and cycling in the newly created street space for London. London's bike map next will show all available bike paths, including the newly created ones. I'm sure Mr. Shashi Verma will go into greater details. As we look at international examples, here is an example of the Indian city next of Bangalore from the Bus Priority Lane campaign. Next, persuading car users to shift to the Humble Bus on the city's Bus Priority Lane, which delivers a faster trip than the cars. Here you can see that BMTC has used crisp messaging, engaged with the media and its citizens. Next, for a successful pilot. Next, the Lakshmi Chechi campaign on Smart Path in Kerala nudges users to use active mobility, but also sharing travel etiquettes during COVID. Using memorable mascots is a great tool, and this is also the case that you can see in the next campaign in Singapore. Next. Launched in 2014, this campaign in Singapore provides visual cues using mascots, which are frequently placed to grab commuters' attention in a way that immediately calls for action. Even tourists visiting the city for the first time would be very quickly accustomed to this particular behavior within a matter of few rides. Next, further cities can use incentives to nudge citizens and help them stick to particular behavioral choices. So here again is an example from Singapore, which has used off-peak discounted fares to nudge people to leave early to avoid crowds, and also inviting people to use the system in off-peak hours. An important factor is that the communication material is available in all 4 languages: English, Malay, Mandarin, and Tamil. So it's very important for us to ensure that the communication material is available across the demographic. Next. So as we move from informing and persuading, it's very, very important for us to engage with our citizens as we come up with the next solutions for a green recovery. Here, identifying the huge demand for cycling in Bangalore and followed by Mohua's guidelines to promote walking and cycling, the city has initiated its plans for creating a cycle-friendly Bangalore. The city is engaging with partners like Citizens for Bangalore, bikes, cycle mayors, and input from several cyclists while planning its pop-up cycle lanes. Open Streets in New York, next slide, allows citizens and organizations to nominate neighborhood streets by filling in online surveys. So as we develop safe zones for cycling for COVID, these are tools that we could embrace. Many cities also have websites where citizens can share their feedback on civic projects, and this would help understanding what citizens expect from the city. Next, New York has also used innovative campaigns like the Free Helmet campaign and the Free Bike Lights campaign to ensure safe ride for citizens and to create better engagement between politicians, police, and citizens. Okay, let's just wait for the images to come up. Next. So how do we, do all of this communication? And here are a few effective tools that you can use, which have been highlighted in many of the examples before. We could use media engagement, static interventions, social media and digital applications, as well as direct public engagement. Next. So while we look at all of these, quick and mid-term strategies, it's also important for us to have longer-term visions, such as creating a branding strategy. Here is an example from Amsterdam, establishing communication cells. So with the Smart Cities mission, multiple cities across the country now have communication cells. Thirdly, allocating funding for outreach, which is very, very important, and building a robust monitoring and evaluation system that's built on data, which can also be used. Next slide. So I'd like to close by saying that everything is communication, especially in a crisis. This is a statement from the mayor of Helsinki. And I would just like to add that we must embrace it right now as we look at creating various interventions in the light of COVID. Thank you. And before I close, I'd like to thank the team, Aditi, Bala, Achyutan, and Santosh, who took the lead to putting together this presentation. And thank you, Archana, for running this presentation. Next, I'd like to welcome Mr. Shashi Verma, the Director of Strategy, Chief Technology Officer, Transport for London, to share the measures taken by London.
Thank you, Ashwati, and good afternoon, everyone in India. I'm sitting here in London. Like everyone, we have been facing the same crisis, and the same measures that are being applied in London are being applied in many other cities. So I just want to pick up on a few key themes. I think the first thing to remember is that although coronavirus is a very peculiar circumstance, many of the things that we're trying to do right now are the things that we were trying to do anyway. The idea of sustainability in terms of transport is not new. It has just been put into very sharp focus because of the current crisis. And the first point to emphasize is that everything that we're doing is evidence-led and data-led. So this is just an example of the sort of data that we are using to inform our decision making. And this is not by any means the only thing. This is just one snapshot out of hundreds of analysis of this kind that we're doing. So this is an analysis of how the transport system is being used today, and where there are localized problems where we're not able to maintain social distancing on the public transport network. Because then the interventions that we do are really targeted towards the issues that we're facing on the ground. These are charts that we can generate like literally within the hour for the last hour's traffic. These particular charts cover the district and circle lines through the day and across all stations. But these charts can be generated on the fly at any time. And I think this is where the power of data really comes in. It's a point that I would emphasize to anyone wanting to make evidence-led decisions. Next slide, please. When you then boil it down to, well, what is it that we want people to do? At one level, there's a lot of complexity in the messaging, but in terms of travel demand management, there are only a few things that people can really do. They can change the mode of travel, they can change the time of travel, they can change the route of travel, or they can simply not travel, right? And it's, bringing in simplicity of this kind is really important to try and get some real focus on these issues. Next one, please. But then the complexity starts when you try to marry up those messages with all the different sectors of the economy and all the different things that those sectors need to do. So the same messages around remoding and retiming, for example, would be very different for people engaged in construction activity compared to schools. And so we have to then analyze this sector by sector, customer by customer, and so on in terms of sort of useful groups. Next slide, please. And then coming out of that is a set of communication messages. And you also then need to look at channels. There are some times when we're using posters of the variety that you see on the right-hand side, but there are other times when it's radio advertisements or TV advertisements. We haven't used TV really, but we've used radio advertisements quite a bit in the last few months. Posters, as you're seeing there, messages at stations or bus stops, direct customer emails, some of which you see over there. But in many cases, it's one-to-one engagement with business groups or with businesses. As an example, retail activity, sort of non-essential retail activity, started in the UK at the beginning of last week. When that got announced 2 weeks earlier, we started working with the business groups very directly to make sure, and with the major retailers, to make sure that the retail activity was not conflicting with the morning and afternoon peaks. Now, morning peak is not really an issue for retail. The afternoon peak is. And the consequence of that engagement was that we ended up with a process whereby shops are opening later and staying open for later so that they're not conflicting with the evening peak. So, in summary, evidence-led, very simple messages, but make it targeted to the people who need to absorb those messages. Just issuing a circular is not enough. You really need to make it effective for the people who need to take these messages on. And I'd go back to the point I was making right at the beginning, that while we're doing these things, there is the sustainability of this campaign as well. And we know that everything's, right now the aim is to manage demand so that there is very little demand in the system. But at some point in the future, we will want the demand to come back up. But we want it to come back up in a manner that is sustainable as well. What we're seeing around the world, and London is no exception to this, is that the recovery is very car-based. That's not a great answer for anyone. So the whole challenge that we've always had of getting people out of cars and into public transport, and indeed getting people out of public transport into active traveling in terms of walking and cycling, that underlying theme has not gone away as a result of this crisis. And in some respects, the crisis is an opportunity to ensure that we stay on that path. I'll leave you with just one statistic that's worth keeping in mind. If you end up with a recovery that's private transport based, just think of mortality statistics. In India, leaving aside the uncertainty about the statistics, in India, about 12,000 deaths have happened because of COVID in the last 3 months. That is the number of people who die in road accidents every 2 weeks. And the big difference between COVID deaths, which happens with people who are older, and I'm not trying to make a value judgment here, but for society, there is a question about people who are in the productive age group versus not. People dying out of COVID are typically older. People dying out of road accidents are typically younger and in the prime of their working life. So we've got to make sure that we don't lose sight of the fact that the number of deaths itself that's happened as a result of COVID is nothing compared to what we normally lose in road accidents. And it's certainly nothing compared to the productive capacity of the economy that's being lost. And that's why all of this messaging has to be not just about the crisis that we face today, but about the sustainability of transport. Thank you. That's all I have to say, Ashwati.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shashi Verma, for your engaging presentation and focusing on the key aspects such as ensuring that our communication is data-led and focusing on the 4 R's of your TDM strategy. And I actually personally love the messaging on the campaigns as well. And thank you for putting the focus onto the main subject that we need to embrace change to transform our cities and to ensure that we have better cities for the future. Now, over to you, Mr. Arun Bothra, CMD and Managing Director, Capital Regional Urban Transport, to share the great work done by the city of Bhubaneswar.
Thank you, Ashwati. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. A little more, if you could just speak a little more.
Yeah,
loud.
okay. Okay.
Thank you.
See, let me tell a few things, actually, a kind of disclaimer. I am a police officer, basically.
Yes, sir.
And I am new to this sector. Last 1 year, I am working for 2 public transport companies.
Sure.
So this has been quite a learning for me also, and thank you for inviting me. What I will focus, actually, what I was told, the communication strategy which we have adopted in Crude, and which has really given us a lot of results, very, very good results.
Yes, sir.
These may not be very new things or relevant things, maybe, I don't know, for others, but we are very happy to have all these things, and I just want to share with you, all of you. I also have a PPT to make a presentation. I'm just putting it there, okay? Wait, just, yeah. Can you see this?
Yes, sir. We can.
Okay, okay. So first thing I will put it like this. Wait a minute, it's moving. Yeah. Okay. So as the experts here, they know very well, the communication is very important thing. And we have, as I mentioned, we have seen the very, very good results for communication. But as I keep telling my team, operation is the first thing. If you have very good operation, only then, if you have a very good level of operation and very good level of service, only then communication give you good results. Because these are the times of social media. If you cannot really push a false information in the system, you cannot. Maybe there was a time when you can create some kind of advertisement and push it there, but now people are able to connect whether you are the information or the advertisement or whatever communication thing you are pushing, whether that is on the ground or not. So the first and most important thing is that your operation has to be really good, your service has to be really good. Only then communication works. But communication, of course, operation and communication, they supplement each other. I would like to first show, in fact, if you can see, can you see this graph, Ashwati?
Yes, sir, I can.
Okay, right. So we are a very new company, actually, less than 2 years old. We started with and then after starting, in fact, there was a cyclone in Odisha, as we have a lot of cyclones coming here. If you can see, in May 2019, there was Fani, and our ridership dropped down to 33,000 per day. And revenue was about 5,39,000 here. But after that, we have made steady growth. If you see the graph going up, very new company, we have only 200 buses, and we could touch 1,31,000. That was our peak, actually. And our average was about 1,15,000. And we were very happy with this kind of growth. And we could also reduce our losses also quite substantially. From 5 lakhs, I think we reached about 12 lakhs per day was our average. But then, all over the world, this COVID thing has struck, and we are now again We were thinking from 33,000 to 1,31,000, and then we are back to say 10-20,000 now. But of course, we are picking up. It's a universal thing for all sectors, so we are also hit by that. Now, we had in fact set up a target of reaching 1 lakh by 15th of October, and somehow we reached on 14th of October 2019. And now coming to the communication part, first I would like to share with the guests here. We have been very new company, as I told you, but we last year in the Expo, Urban Mobility Expo in Lucknow, we were at just the best city bus service project initiative of India. It was very, very encouraging for us. Similarly, in Odisha, we have got marketing campaign of the year and best consumer connect brand of Odisha 2019. These particularly last two things are directly related to the communication. Now, we have a communication team. In fact, I will strongly suggest, because after our communication team came on board, we have a very young team and very, very passionate team. We have seen the results, and the ridership and everything, revenue has gone up steadily after that. One thing which we have realized, we have experienced, the communication team cannot work in isolation. That means it is not that you just create some creatives and you update some your Facebook and you write on Twitter. Our communication team handles the grievances directly. They talk to the consumers, customers. They handle, of course, social media. They arrange events and market research, all kind of thing. In fact, they keep on going to our VQS, our depot. The communication team, I'm underlining this particular fact that they are not located only in the office. They keep moving, and they keep, in fact, sometimes the communication team moves in the buses to talk to the passengers and understand what is there, what is helping and what is not helping. These are some, we keep putting some or other creative every second day, every third day, maybe every daily also. So I just picked up a few here because our communication strategy is basically like that. We keep on looking for trends in the social media, and whatever is working, like there are particular kinds of memes they work in social media, so we pick up them and we convert them, like the Spider-Man, Akshay Kumar, these kind of things which works with the general common passenger. So, and it has really connected with us, with the passengers, particularly with the young mass. Similarly, of course, we are using Odia language communications also, and our guides and captains. We have not hired any professional model, though we have a lot of people here like Odia stars and TV star and movie stars. But we use our own bus guides and bus captains as our models, and it has been really appreciated both by outside customers and inside customers also, our own employees. Then we created this musket. This musket was created, its name is Moby, and I am happy to share this name was given by our customers only. In fact, we had a kind of a competition on the social media that whoever wants to name this musket, and many people gave a lot of names, and that out of that we picked up Moby, because our main thing, our buses are called Mobus. So Moby we have picked up, and this Moby has become quite a popular thing in Bhubaneswar. Anywhere if you see this, people will say, yes, this belongs to Mobus, this belongs to Kroot. And it is everywhere. In fact, I'm telling you very happily, in school fancy dress competitions, the children, they become Moby. They put clothes like that and they say, I'm Mobus or I'm Moby. That is the reach you can understand. This is our typical VQS, very nicely made. But if you can see this, the map which we took from Western countries like London and everywhere, London Tube map, or this maybe metro map, you can say. This was done by our communication team, and it has been really appreciated. It has both sides, one side Odia, one side English, and we have also developed a pocket map, which is foldable. People can carry it. We distribute it for free for our customers, and it on one side it shows the map, On the other side, it shows all the important routes, and also in Bhubaneswar or in Cuttack, what are the important historical places or places of interest. They're also shown especially to promote tourism and to help the people coming from outside. Then very quickly we launched, because when we realized that our many people are not able to use digital mode, and they are not able to use the digital passes, monthly or yearly passes. Our communication team suggested that we should go for physical passes also. These passes were developed, and immediately in 1 month, one to 2 months, we added 6,000 dedicated customers. So these are small things which, like when you travel in the bus, sometimes I also travel in the bus, and many times my communication team, they travel in the bus, they understand from the passengers what exactly they want. 2-3 things very quickly I will tell you. We have started newspapers in the buses, free newspapers. In fact, we reached newspaper companies and we told them that you can have a dedicated readership. So they tied up with us, they are giving us for free, and those newspapers are distributed in the end. We actually think of, at the end of the day, the newspaper is waste. And we are thinking of creating a fund out of that waste money for our guides, and because when you, like, say you have 500 newspapers every day or 1,000 newspapers every day left over, you can easily sell them and make some money, and then that can be used as a welfare fund for the people. Then someday people came that they want a bus for school children. There was no way we could get, because there is no system of rental. We decided to give it free, but this gave us a lot of publicity. We just spent, I think, 1,500 rupees. I'm telling you, 1,500 rupees we spent on petrol and diesel and our salaries, if you can say. And out of that 1,500, we got publicity and mileage of lakhs and lakhs of rupees. I'm personally very active on Twitter. People keep writing to me, and we reply to them very quickly. I'm telling you, one student wrote he sent a message to me. You can see on the right side that if the bus time can be changed by 5 minutes, because many students are missing the bus because the class timing and the bus timing is like that. And in 45 minutes, we replied him after consulting our teams. And this is the message I wrote. Dear Tushar, it will be changed by 10 minutes within this week. You don't need to walk to next bus stop. We want you to save time and use it for the studies. Nothing is more important than supporting students and young people like you. It will be done. Blessings to you and your friend. I'm telling you, this one reply, it went viral. It went viral, and people appreciated so much that there's a company and that there are people who are responding to the customers in, say, 30-40 minutes time. This in COVID time, because buses were not running and people were at home, we created some, just to keep our brand alive, we created some kind of these games for people who can play in their houses. Mobile story, we are asking people to write stories about their experiences in buses. Some people say, some people got married in buses, like they came together and they got married later. Some people are in love still, and they say that I found my love in the bus. So we are asking them to write stories, and we are going to publish a book out of it. This may be first kind of this bus. Somebody was very depressed. He needed money, and in bus another customer says that okay, I'll give you loan. So these kind of stories, very happy stories, are there. These are some of the events we do, and we of course publicize them every time. This is from my side. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing, all this amazing work from Bhubaneswar. It's very interesting to see that you're such a young company, yet, like the way Mr. Shashi Verma was saying, maybe obviously not at the state of London, but still you do have a data and evidence-based system, and you've invested in a communications team that's really, working for the best. And we did see that you were a Twitter star as well. Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. Next, I'd like to invite Olivier. Transport Specialist World Bank and our co-moderator for this particular session to kickstart the panel discussion. Over to you, Gerald.
Thank you so much, Ashwati. First, everybody, a real pleasure to participate in the final in our series of Urbanlogue. It's been a very exciting series. A lot of questions from all of you that make us think about what is the next step when it comes to urban mobility. So, you know, the first thing I would like to say is reflecting on Shashi's comment that today there is a concern that people may be shifting to cars as the response to COVID. I just want to emphasize that the COVID crisis that we are facing will determine the future of urban mobility, not only this year, but for the decade to come. The way the industry reacts, the way we react, will really define whether we have sustainable mobility down the road or not. So, you know, the inform, persuade, engage elements that Ashwati mentioned are quite central to avoid that this become our fate. And to start the conversation, I would like to turn to Ms. Majid, because she brings with her a very rich experience working with the Bloomberg Philanthropies and the India Smart Cities Challenge, as well as trying to create, you know, cities that are more friendly for infant, toddlers, caregivers. And through that, she had to go through innovative ways of thinking about how do you communicate transformation. So, Ms. Majid, when you look at public transport today and urban mobility more broadly, it is very deeply impacted by COVID. And it's true because of a drop in revenues. It's true because of concerns over the perceived risk associated with crowding in public transport. So from your experience, could you share some of the best ways to engage with citizens, with decision makers, not only to rebuild that confidence, but also to secure the resources that will allow India to move again in a normal way or as close as possible?
Sure. Thank you so much, Mr. Oliver. And thank you to all the organizers, delighted to participate. And this is such an important topic that I really am grateful for this opportunity to discuss some of the work that has been happening under an initiative that we call Urban 95. And briefly, before I go into your question, Gerald, I would like to touch upon what is Urban 95. So the 95 centimeters in urban is the average height of a healthy 3-year-old child. So basically, this particular global initiative asks cities the question of what would you do if you were to look at your city from the height of 95 centimeters, which is the height of a healthy 3-year-old child. And that really changes your perspective in terms of how you think about mobility, how you think about public spaces, how you think about usage in urban services and so on. And even pre-COVID, but definitely more relevant in terms of what is happening right now and what's unfolding and into the foreseeable future. This group of very young children is very vulnerable. And therefore, all the strategies, all the things that we are thinking about are things, obviously, as Mr. Verma said, have already been things that we have been thinking about from a sustainability point of view, but they become even more critical at a time when we are thinking about the youngest and the most vulnerable. So going into kind of thoughts on what we think about when we think about communicating transformation. The first point I want to make is that when we think about communications, I think it's important not to think about it in isolation. And I think Mr. Bothra touched upon it very clearly when he said that in the example of Bhubaneswar, you have to think about it in an integrated way. And this kind of links to early childhood from our perspective as well, because the child is a whole. You cannot think of different sectors and then see how it benefits a child. You have to think of a child as a whole. And I take that approach, we take that approach towards projects and some of the work that we do. And therefore, there are different things to look at. For instance, you have to look at a lot of things from the usage perspective. So no matter how you communicate and how well you communicate, things will not work if you're not able to really think of what is affecting the user experience and how user-friendly it is. And therefore, I would like to emphasize first that that's also a very important element of thinking through. And for Urban 95, ultimately, it's a urban design initiative looking at spaces and so on. So that aspect is very, very important. And so even before the community engagement piece, you have to think about what it or linked to the community engagement piece and the building support piece is that you have to think about what matters to the people that are going to be using this. And one way to think about this as well is in the context of what Mr. Verma said is data and the evidence for it. So what we're doing, for instance, to give you a specific example from some of our projects, or what, when I say our, I mean in terms of working with the cities and how cities take it forward under Urban 95, is really when we look at projects, there's a lot of prep work that is done, to put it very simply, in terms of who the users are. Are you talking to them? Are you gathering observational data? How are you really thinking about what makes the most sense, and are you really talking to the people? So that itself is both an aspect of building support and communication, but you're really engaging with the local community, but you're also then collecting the right information that will help you further in the user experience, but also in the communication space. The other thing to think about is for instance, especially in the context of India, in terms of then directly building support and directly communicating. I think the other thing that's linked to it is also the capacity building. Now, capacity building is a broad term, and just like citizen engagement, which is another broad term, it's important to get beyond what just using the terms and really thinking of what are the good ways to engage people and break these concepts down. And so we feel overall that these are that this building support component, if you will, or the citizen engagement component, needs a lot of effort and time, and also resources that need to go into it. And so it should not and cannot remain on paper, and as we've seen in the case of Bhubaneswar already, but that it's something that requires a sustained effort. So that's, and so in the context of some of the work that we are doing and will be doing, because we are also learning a lot from the work that we are doing, is that you have questions on, for instance, in the Indian context, what are the use of resident welfare associations, what is the use of ward committees, or mohalla sabhas, and how they're structured and how they can be involved. So all of these linkages have to be formed in terms of thinking through engagement at the ward level, at the neighborhood level, at the city level, and thinking through who is asking these questions in the city. Obviously, there are some of the more obvious ways around it, like advocacy campaigns, and thinking through initiatives at a programming level, such as Rahagiri and so on, that are happening, but these are some of the important components. The other question you asked was on resources, and I very quickly touch upon this. I think this is a constraint that we are seeing, a lot of us will be seeing given COVID-19. And the way we think about it, and the way our partners are thinking about it, is more as, in terms of doing these initiatives, and especially catering to the most vulnerable, is an add-on and not an additional resource. So if you think of it from an innovation lens and from the perspective of bringing in more resources towards these innovations, and I think it's perhaps a framing that will work, where you can get supporters like us and other groups in the field that can take the lead in supporting some of these innovations that can then feed into costs that the city would already be undertaking as part of some of the work that it's doing.
Excellent. Well, I mean, thank you, Rujda, because I think you point to something that is absolutely central, which is every approach that deals with engagement, communication, has to be customer-centric. And that may seem like a very banal thing to say, but it's actually so fundamental, and it's so embedded, for example, in the model that she was mentioning about getting data to understand what really happens, that centricity means that you really understand what is happening to your end customer. And, you know, thank you very much. I would like to actually turn to Mr. Botra, who just, you know, emphasize how much CRUT and OSLTC are working in terms of understanding the customer, connecting to the customer, and the like. When looking at CRUT, what was quite fascinating to me was the motto of redefining the way we move by providing mobility option to residents for a more sustainable future for all. The redefining the way we move has never been more relevant than today. So, you know, obviously, Mr. Botra, you and your organization have been very innovative. You have a My Bus, My PBS, My e-rickshaw. It's very personal, so it's very customer-centric. What do you think it will take to rebuild the confidence as fast as possible and secure the resources that are required to keep your services running, in particular bus services, with limitation on capacity and requirements of social distancing?
Thank you, Gerald. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Let me first clarify this Mo-bus is not actually an original idea, because in our state, the government of Odisha, they have a lot of schemes. Main scheme is Mo Sarkar, that is my government. So we have just, because we are a government company, we thought to take this word from the government, and this has really clicked, number one. Number two, as you mentioned that how, of course, this is a problem for everybody, for us as well, we understand. But we have two, three things which go in our favor. Number one, I understand that revenue, money, all these things are very important, and it's a lot of problematic thing, but we are a government funded company. In spite of the crunch which government is facing all around, we are not that really worried, because public transport is something which has to run, and our government is willing to fund that. That's part two. Three, how to bring the customers back. There also, let me tell you, somehow in last 1 to 2 years, we have been able to, whatever you say, good or bad, but we have been able to drive a lot of other players out of the market because of our services. Because mobile service is so good, I'm not saying because I'm the MD, I'm telling it truthfully as a citizen of Bhubaneswar. Everybody, it has become a, you will be happy to know, when people come to Bhubaneswar these days, even tourists, tourist guides, they tell them that, okay, you should take, apart from going to different places, you should also take a ride in Mobus. That's like, it's a kind of a, when you have the bucket list kind of thing, that what all you are going to do in Bhubaneswar. So one of the things you are doing in Bhubaneswar is to ride in Mobus. So we have become part of the city life here. So people also don't have honestly much choice in Bhubaneswar. It's a small city. Anyhow, they have started to come back. My job is to assure people that yes, we are doing our best as far as cleanliness is concerned, as far as the health standards are concerned. So we are not allowing people to come without mask. We are not allowing anybody to stand. We are taking limited number of people. And we are, one thing as far as, because it's about communication, our communication team goes to bus depot in the night, and the cleanliness process, we have made videos. We have circulated it to the regular media, the TV and the channels. So the TV channels, when they showed that how the bus is being disinfected, how cleanliness is given so much of importance by Mobus. So somehow the people, because they trust us as a brand, and the trust got reinforced, and already we have started, people are again coming, and we are very happy to tell that the graph is rising again. Thank you.
You know, I find it quite fascinating that Mobus is one of the attraction people want to go to when they visit your state. I mean, you know, it's the same actually when you go to Moscow or Singapore or London. You will see that the top attraction typically will include a visit to the metro. But, you know, to the bus, it means really that you're onto something quite substantial. And, you know, I want to congratulate you, and certainly I look forward to an opportunity to visit, you know, Bhubaneswar and your state to see this in real life. Let me now
we will have a special ride for you.
Okay, looking forward to it. Let me now turn back to Shashi. I think, Shashi, you provided some very thought-provoking ideas as to how you're addressing COVID today. And we know that the UK has been particularly impacted in terms of mortality by the disease. So we understand why it's such a priority. But I would like to now move from the today to what we do midterm, right? the COVID in London has triggered a lot of conversation how we reimagine a more sustainable mobility, looking at walking, biking, public transport as well. And, how do you build on that new momentum to avoid the potential challenge of seeing people moving back to cars and the like?
Well, thank you, Gerald. I think it's worth reminding ourselves, what the underlying themes are for our transport strategy, because those themes have not gone away. So climate change is a huge theme. That's not about to be changed by the coronavirus. And even the momentary drop in carbon emissions, which Ashwati mentioned in the introduction, we hope that there is some sustainability behind that. The second is air quality. We know that there are a lot of deaths caused by air quality, and therefore that's a huge issue. There's a third issue about safety on the transport network, including sort of road accidents and so on. There's the whole question of how transport and health, personal health, interact with each other. As we know, the more car use there is in society, there's more sort of stationary behavior and therefore more obesity and so on. Those are the themes that underpin our transport strategy, and that's a long-term horizon for the next 25 years. But that's essentially the themes that we're working on. So, despite the last 3 months and everything that's going on right now, those themes remain. And everything that we do in response to the crisis, which you mentioned as well, Gerald, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that we have to get back to the track in meeting those core objectives. There is no future for cities unless we meet those objectives. A city where there's very high levels of obesity alone would be a very difficult place to be. So in London, our transport strategy, for example, is based on the idea that our sustainable mode share, which is walking, cycling, and public transport, should become 80% of all journeys. Today, it's about 63%. Now, not to put too fine a point on it, 63 going to 80 is one thing, but car use going from 37 to 20 is quite a different thing. So that is the nature of the radical change that we need. And I would argue that that's the same radical change that we need everywhere in the world. I mean, in India, sustainable mode share is usually quite high, but that's because people are making very local journeys or they're walking and cycling. These are the people who are usually invisible to our policymakers because the policymakers are themselves not engaged in that kind of behavior. But the job everywhere in the world is to maintain those core themes of sustainability around climate change, air quality, health, road safety, and so on. And the fundamental tools that can be used to get to that sort of outcome are actually no different everywhere in the world. They're the same themes of increasing public transport usage, increasing walking and cycling usage, and so on. So, the fundamental investment that's needed in public transport, including, by the way, not just physical infrastructure, but making public transport convenient in ways that, Mr. Bothra has touched upon, for example. Those are all the key to making cities successful. And I would finish just with one point, Gerald, which is we should always remember why cities exist. Cities exist for only one reason, which is that they allow economic activity to be organized more efficiently than spreading them across the place. And we should never, ever lose sight of the fact that the job of cities is to make life productive. And we should design cities so that they become even more productive than they are today. And that can only be done by a good transport system.
Thank you, Sashi, but I would like to push you a little bit further for how you translate the experience of TfL to the Indian context. I mean, we have been working for a long time together in India, going across many cities. Unlike London, where there is a very clear strategy that is very focused on a wide variety of factors to make cities livable, productive, etc., and inclusive, this is not yet the case in many cities. So how do you see this opportunity actually to convert the crisis into a new momentum in India?
Well, I think, Gerald, the first thing to point out from the London experience is the absolute centrality of the bus network, right? Which is the missing piece of the jigsaw in India. There's a lot of focus on investment in metros, which is not wrong, by the way. There is a lot of investment needed in metros. But the reality is that even if you look at metro-dominated cities, and London is one example, but if you look at Singapore or Hong Kong or Mexico City or any of these cities, for example, despite having very dense and very extensive urban metro networks, the reality is that more journeys are carried on buses than are carried on the metro. And in India, that is the missing piece of the jigsaw, because the bus system is not seen as the glamorous, shining example of public investment. So, you and I have been working on this, and I would remind everyone again and again that the core function of the bus network is not to be forgotten. The second thing that's worth reminding everyone is that the fragmentation of the transport network is a real issue. People don't ride buses or the metro, they want to get to work. And if that involves taking both the buses and the metro, then that is not their problem. It's something that the city has to provide. So thinking of transport in terms of complete door-to-door integration is really important. And that, that includes walking and cycling and everything else. Every public transport journey starts with a walking trip. You have to walk to your bus stop or to your metro station. So, integration is really important. And the point that we've been making, not just in India, but around the world, is that integration is about physical integration, but in many cases, it's also about institutional integration. Because the fractures that we're seeing in transport come from the fact that different institutions are responsible for different elements of transport. If you have a public works department responsible for roads, and a bus department responsible for running the bus service, and a police department responsible for enforcing it, you will never ever get a bus lane.
Thank
But
you so
put
much.
all of them together, and you get bus lanes.
Absolutely, Shashi. I think the integration is certainly a key element, and thanks for reminding us that even in the best performing cities around the world that have metros, buses is still carrying more passengers, and that's true of everywhere that we have analyzed as well. I understand that Mr. Kunal Kumar has joined us as well, so let me welcome Mr. Kumar to the panel. And, we have been discussing extensively about what to do now, and are now looking at how do we look forward in terms of preparing for a new normal in mobility by looking at how you inform, you persuade, you engage, and certainly in the context of a smart city mission, how do you use the instruments you have at your disposal to create the type of environment that was being described for Bhubaneswar. So Mr. Kumar, if you could share with us, your perspective on how this crisis can be turned into an opportunity to move to the next level Indian mobility.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
You are. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Because I'm not visible, I'm sure, because I can't, because Zoom is not allowed in office, and I'm, banking on my mobile hotspot to do this. Hi, Shashi. Hi, Gerald. Hi, Mr. Bothra, Aswati, Rushda. Nice to see you all, and nice to see all the participants on this webinar. I'm feeling very sad about it because it's the last episode, as to say, of this series. It has been a fantastic, series, and I have been interacting with a lot of city officials, a lot of state officials during the last 45 days that we've had this webinar series, and they've actually given us very encouraging feedback, and have asked for more such, discussions and dialogue and knowledge sharing to happen in the future. Of course, this is one mechanism which was not very used before, the webinar mechanism, but as we say, every cloud has a silver lining. I think because of COVID, we've taken to it, and it's become very easy to share ideas amongst each other, and that's what we've been doing. And it's been a fantastic journey over the last 6 weeks. 6 weeks, yes. And I would like to thank all the partners. Of course, ITDP. A fantastic job by the entire team, Shreya, Swati, Venugopal. I'm sorry I'm not being able to name everyone. Everyone has done a great job. Of course, World Bank, Gerald, you, Nupur, everyone has come together to put this, Vaishali and the entire team. Of course, everyone who has joined as panelist and participant has been no less of their contribution has been immense, and everyone has contributed to this rich discussion. As you said, Gerald, the timing for this webinar was exactly meant to help us reflect during this time of crisis as to how do we look at the challenges which are emerging, and of course, also to prepare ourselves for the new normal. I don't know if all of us understand what the new normal is. We keep talking about the new normal because I don't I don't think any of us has any idea of what the new normal is going to be. But all of us have a sense that post the crisis, there are certain course corrections that we need to make in our policies, in the kind of infrastructure we have, in the way we run our public transport services, and look at transport in general. And I think we are trying to all collectively understand that future and trying to prepare ourselves for it. So, you mentioned as to how smart cities will go about this in the future. So I think it's got to be a mix of some strategic initiatives and some tactical. And one of those tactical initiatives, which will potentially become a strategic initiative going forward, is what we're launching tomorrow. In fact, I've been kept busy over the last 3-4 days because of our several launches we have tomorrow. Incidentally, tomorrow is the 5th anniversary for the Smart Cities function mission. And one of the things they launch tomorrow is that
So we can't hear you, sir. We're just losing you there.
Okay, I'm there, but now am I audible?
Yeah, you're becoming much better. So maybe if you could just, you said one of the things that, yeah, you're launching. So we can't hear you again.
Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Now you are audible.
Quickly. I'll just complete quickly before the next network problem comes. So India Cycles for Change is a challenge we are launching tomorrow. My request to all participants is please join us for the challenge. I think Shruti has already mentioned about it and she's just put the poster on here. So as I said, this is one of the tactical things we're starting with, but long term, we have to go ahead and make a strategic initiative towards moving urban transport towards non-motorized and cycling and walking infrastructure. And so it's been a good beginning from the Smart Cities mission, but we have to realize it's a process of evolution and we have to be patient with it and keep talking and having these dialogues and keep tinkering with the policies, the infrastructure, the way they're needed. And sooner than later, we would not even realize when we've kept doing it this hard effort that we've come to a tipping point when things go into an auto mode and then they will pick up. But till that time happens, we have to evolve together. And there is no shortcut to all this. I mean, there is a learning curve which every country and city has to go through. And I think we can only do ourselves justice by understanding what's happened across the world. But our learning curve, despite that understanding, has to be our own. And we have to take our own steps and be very innovative and very contextual in the way we look at these things in the future. I would also mention the fact that most cities have started to feel crunch regarding resources as far as funding sustainable transport and public transport is concerned. One, public transport itself has lost out on a lot of commuters and therefore the revenue collection has gone down. And second, because state governments and national governments are kind of very it's become very difficult to actually support public transport undertakings. They actually have to cut down on a lot of different expenditures. That source is also dried up. So I think it's time that our cities, and that's one of the areas where we have to work and will be our strategic initiative, as to how do we move cities towards innovatively financing public transport, sustainable transport. So things like, Shashi is there, he's been talking about congestion charges, and we've seen parking charges are a norm pretty much everywhere across the world. We hardly see good parking charge machinery in Indian cities. Transit-oriented development where money is raised through betterment charges or tax increment financing or even land-based instruments. Those kinds of things now need to pick up with the clear route towards urban transport fund, which also some cities do have, but they really have not been able to implement or bring it to ground and actually bring the fruits to the people. So those are things, of course. The third thing we are trying to push for the smart cities is now to really evolve the SPVs to think through these things. I think with the kind of staff they have, with the kind of brain power they have, they will not be able to make this work. And therefore, we would really be infusing the right talent that is needed in our cities to take these things forward. So that's one area where good public transport, good transport planners, engineers, and specifically, I think urban planners. And I remember, one of the statements I heard from a renowned urban planner. He said, urban planners don't need to be urban planners. All they need to be good observers. If they can see and observe people moving on streets and can actually understand conflict points and can understand what's going wrong, and they can remove them or at least minimize them, that's the definition of smart transport. Smart transport doesn't mean it's a good looking road or has very good footpath or has good looking street lights. But a smart road is one which actually avoids conflicts, enables people the way they want to meet on the road, is good for all kinds of people, all abilities, all ages, and is good for all kinds of means of transport. So those are the kinds of things I think a mentality of actually bringing knowledge from somewhere and trying to plant here is not working out. And I think our cities will have, because for example, hawkers. No urban planning book does talk about hawkers. No urban or transport planning book does talk about hawkers. It doesn't talk about the informal settlements, the kind of challenges you face in dense localities. Varanasi has a same density as Manhattan. Manhattan is 26,000 people per square kilometers. Varanasi is 28,000 people per square kilometers. The only thing is it's all horizontal and Manhattan is all vertical. And Manhattan per person's space is 49 square meters. In Varanasi is 4 square meters. Your choice of transport, your way of looking at transport, your way of looking at mobility has to be different there. So we are evolving. There are no shortcut answers to the question that Gerald has raised. I think resources is very important. We have to understand that we have to generate resources and give that priority to public transport and non-motorized transport, walking and cycling. We have to take strategic initiatives as well as tactical initiatives going forward. We have to encourage this dialogue, and we have to understand that this change will not only happen by one or two initiatives. It has to be a bouquet of things on infrastructure, on policy, on piloting. Now, for example, one of the things that this trouble with a lot of people face with how do we engage with people to understand what they really want. And I have gone through this in Pune. So when we were trying to do a pedestrianization of a road, there was a lot of debate that we had. And then I thought, how long can a debate go on? And so what we did was overnight, we took over about 300 people and reconstructed the road. And we said, this probably doesn't fit into the citizen engagement rule book because we clearly had to close an engagement and go according to what citizens wanted. But we sensed what they were wanting, and we sensed that there is a logjam because they actually would be able to move up on the ladder of this discussion only if they see something on ground. So we changed it overnight, and next day the discussion was completely different, and the discussion was not about philosophical issues of how streets should look like, but it was about, look, this looks like this. If you can tinker this like this, if you tinker that like that, it'll be really better. And that really actually helped that road project to go through in the next month. It was done after 6 months of engagement paralysis, as I call it. So I don't mean to say that engagement is wrong. Please don't misunderstand me. But we have between engagement, action, leading to more engagement, more action, and so on. So, and that cannot be a solution for Chennai or maybe a Hyderabad or maybe a Bhopal. It could be different. I'm just telling my Pune experience. But the point I'm trying to make is, let's focus on the context. And let's work together with our cities to understand where their shortcomings are, what they want to improve on, how they want to improve it. And let's put all our weight behind them and work with them. I'm sure the things are evolving in the right direction. We already had our minister, speak about cycling in the I think the third Urbanlogue, and the ministry has actually come out with a lot of change in its own course of thinking and post the COVID crisis. And we've been talking to cities. We've been actually advising state governments to move towards non-motorized and supporting public transport and all. And I know over the long term, we are all committed towards it. And I'm very sure sooner than later, we will be setting new benchmarks in the way a country like ours looks onto walking, cycling, essentially making ease of moving for citizens. It's a very important component of ease of living for citizens, which our Honorable Prime Minister espouses. And yes, so it's been incredible, this journey with all of you. I probably in some ways got a chance to anchor this. I'm very thankful to ITDP and my entire team to having worked together with us to make this possible. And my best wishes to all the participants and all those who have joined. I just want to appeal to you, to request to you that we've been talking about it for 6 weeks now. Let's act for the next 6 weeks and come back again and talk about it again. in the same spirit that I talked about in Pune. And we would love to listen from you and love to see the nice, great things you do about changing minds, changing the way governments work, and changing the way people interact with transport and the ease with which they get transport. Stop here, maybe. I hope I was audible throughout, Ashwati. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And you know, I would say three things shortly before turning to Ashwati. I mean, the first is what is powerful about this series, this Urbanlogue, is of course, you know, you have speakers that are great speakers coming in, but we also collect all the questions that you have been raising. And there has been a lot of conversation with many cities after and between each of the events. As a result, I mean, it's really heartwarming to see that now the Smart City mission is able to move forward with very concrete program that will be announced tomorrow, and that, you know, we can see a momentum building up. The second thing is we need indeed this bouquet of piloting that Mr. Kumar was describing. As many streams that can go forward, and within that, a very good evaluation framework that can capture the experience and transfer it back. You know, the experience of Bhubaneswar is extremely useful, the one we just heard about earlier today. How do we take this vibe, this customer centrality, and transfer it to other places? That's really important. And the last point is, as you do that, you can create a virtuous cycle, working with cities, building confidence, having people say, yes, that's what we want, and then move to very large scale implementation. And that's what really the future can be paved as. So I'm turning to Ashwati now for the second part.
Thank you so much, Gerald. And I'm sure, you know, Mr. Kunal Kumar had mentioned that he'd have to step out right now because tomorrow is their anniversary. But I'll still take a moment, you know, to thank him because it was a fantastic journey to collaborate with the mission and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs on this program, but also to see that this program is stepping ahead into a much greater challenge, such as the National Cycling Challenge. And we look forward to also collaborating with all other partners, many other partners across the country to support our 100 cities in this transformation. Now, you know, I know that I've actually shared some questions, but I'm going to take some questions from the panel, like from our participants. And here's one to Mr. Shashi Verma. This is from Balchand, and he mentions that accidents involving non-motorized transport users, especially cyclists, is a major issue even in London. So the city is even looking, he says that the city is looking at various solutions, cycle tracks along Thames. Now, India, where following traffic regulations is not the best, he feels that fatalities will increase with cycling on arterial roads. So what are your suggestions to save cycling in India? And maybe you could also give us some thoughts about your, you know, cycling measures that you're looking to implement in London itself as well.
Right. So, I mean, cycling has been increasing in London for a long time, and we've been dedicating more and more space to cycling. And so we've learned quite a bit about what sort of interventions work and what ones don't work. So, you know, in the very early days when we were creating so-called cycle lanes, all we were doing was paint a line on the road and say, this bit of the road is now dedicated to cycling. And frankly, most people don't feel comfortable cycling in that sort of environment because there's no barrier to stop a car or a heavier vehicle intervening in that space. When you look at all the fatalities that were happening with cyclists, I mean, by the way, that's gone down quite a lot. But you know, about 5 years ago, we were having, you know, of the order of 15 cyclists die on our roads every year. Now, you know, 15 is a big number. You know, 15 is 15 more than you should have, but it's very small compared to the road safety statistics in India. What we realized is that, you know, the things like left turning lorries, which was one of the main causes of people dying, cars or other vehicles getting in the way of cyclists, another reason for cyclists dying and so on. And eventually the answer is that if you want cyclists really to come out in full force, you have to create segregated cycle lanes. I mean, segregation to the point where it's very difficult for motorized vehicles to come into that space. I mean, not impossible, but very, very difficult for motorized vehicles to come in there. And as we've started creating segregated cycle lanes, we've seen the number of cyclists increase by a very substantial margin. Now, of course, it's starting from a very small base. So even 100% increase in cycling is actually very small compared to the traffic that we carry on buses and on the public transport network. But that is the sort of intervention that is needed, right? And the point I would make in response to Balchan's question is that there is never a perfect mechanism to create cycling space. You have to work with what's available in your city. If there's space available along rivers, great. If there's not space available along the rivers, you have to create that space along the roads. And this constant debate that I hear, or there's no space on the roads. Well, there's no space on the roads because there are too many cars. So get the cars out and there will be space. Get the cars out and then you have space for cycling and you have space for buses and you have space for all of these things. And those are the means by which road space gets used effectively and efficiently. So, we shouldn't ever forget that, road space is limited, but it should be used in the most effective manner, not by the people who have the loudest voice, but in the manner that's most effective.
That's fantastic, sir. Thank you so much for that reply. So now I'll come over to you, Rushta. And here, while this is very relevant in the COVID scenario, but even in the past, so for example, like when Mr. Shashi Verma was talking about these cycle lanes, like it's very important for us to get the cyclists there as well, and which is particularly looking at inducing or changing that behavior and that behavioral pattern. And sometimes in your case, even initiating this behavioral change, like right from the beginning, when you're looking at really young children, toddlers, for example. So, could you share with us some national and international examples from the Urban 95 program that you're taking right steps to induce this behavioral change? And, if you could share the process that you are testing, that would be great for the cities.
Sure, Ashwati. Thanks for that question, because I think a lot of work is around behavior change, and all of it is linked, as I mentioned earlier, and linked in particular to the outreach and the communications aspect of it. So in terms of focusing on behaviors in particular, and how do you build this culture, if you will, in this instance of cycling, there are several ways to look at it. We look at it from the different disciplines that you have in behavior science, through the urban design interventions, which I've touched upon earlier, the social and behavior change communications piece. You can think of it in a pure behavioral economics aspect, or the participatory approach, which itself is the building support. And it's an important part of how cities think about this as they move to integrate some of these elements under Urban 95 for the very young. But two things I'd like to note is that when we talk about behaviors and how to build this culture, obviously we have to start, I think in many instances we think we have to start very young, but it's not only about influencing the behaviors of the young, but also of the caregivers and people who are current users. So therefore, so we have to start now, no matter what the range of the demographic range might be. The other thing to keep in mind is that many of us think of behaviors as something that will happen in the long term. So let's focus on the projects now and think this in a long-term way. But what we have, of course, this is a long-term process as well. But what we are finding in terms of the work that we are doing through Urban 95 is that it's possible to start changing the behaviors and building this culture through the tactical intervention work, which Mr. Kunal just mentioned, and also through the day-to-day engagement of citizens in the entire process. And we have some examples right here in India. The 3 cities that we have partnered with our Urban 95 cities are Pune. Bhubaneswar has been a long-time partner of the Bernard Van Leer Foundation, and also Udaipur. And in Udaipur, for instance, one example that comes to mind is that of an intervention that we did in a community space. It was about reclaiming that space. And obviously, these are not new examples. This is kind of a trend that we are seeing worldwide. But what was interesting in Udaipur was that because we had involved the community in the actual design process, but also the city had reached out to almost all the constituents as related to Urban 95, including children and students and teachers and parents. It really became an occasion when this particular intervention was being implemented, where people were very positive, very enthusiastic, and actually realized it was their space. And some of the things that related two behaviors was that, for instance, there were spaces now for designated parking, and people continued to use that space for parking and not put their cars and two-wheelers everywhere or throw trash out or garbage out. So things like that, which we actually seen sustained in the short term through these temporary interventions. So that's something to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind, and we've seen this in Pune, is where the city is undertaking an ambitious project. That's a traffic plaza project, which is to basically teach young children how to use a lot of these, how to bike and how to do some of these things. But the city has undertaken a lot of data collection, talked to schools in the area. They have brought in architecture students. They have really involved people very closely. And this all also helps in that ownership and kind of supporting behavior change of people. I just want to highlight very quickly one international example that we have in Tirana, because I think this would be incomplete without talking about Tirana, and it's really great what they're doing. And there is a current ongoing cycling campaign there as well, which began during the COVID quarantine time, and they believe it could set a strong precedent for long-term behavior change. But the biking expansion is really happening from three directions. There is the technical side with the pop-up bike lanes and design and implementation. Also, space is limited, so they are reclaiming some space from parking and so on. The bike supply and the supporting market side of things, which they are looking into and providing, and the cultural side, which is also the behavior side of how to make it cool, how to destigmatize it, and how to connect it to the local culture, which I think we've also seen in Bhubaneswar. And so, therefore, these are kind of the three ways that Tirana is thinking about it. There are a lot of initiatives now connected to all these three areas that they're doing. And I think one of the images that stays with me from Tirana, which was pre-COVID, is how they're creating these bike lanes specifically for toddlers, for the 3 to 5, 6-year-olds, where they're actually teaching them to bike. And that visual is something that they're using to communicate why this is important for our youngest. So things like that that contribute to culture change.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's fantastic, Rushda. Like, you know, the way we actually ensure that there's culture that's changed, like both at the young age, but also through caregivers who are at, you know, various age groups. So that's fantastic to hear about. And now I would very quickly move over to Mr. Arun Botra. So, you know, engaging with the community actually needs its own nuance. Now, while we receive support, so you had mentioned about how, you know, so many people were appreciating your work, but many cities are very scared to take this leap because they are afraid of brickbats. And often, you know, because of the fear of brickbats, they just keep away from any sort of engagement with the community. Now, can you please share some strategies that are used by Kruth to tackle this particular criticism? And that would be great to hear from you, sir.
See, Ashwati, am I audible?
Yeah, a little more if you could just speak.
Okay, yeah, sorry. Okay. I will have to tell a few secrets actually here in that way. So let me tell you 2-3 things very quickly. Number one, as I told in the beginning, your service has to be good. Only then you can open. You can be open to people, to questions, to suggestions, to any communication if your service is good. So because we are confident of our service and we have been able to create a name, a brand name for ourselves, so we know that overall, of course, there will be criticism. There are critics also, but we know that it is ratio of 90-10. So we can afford that, number one. Number two, for those 10 also, we take every single feedback seriously. Every single feedback. Our communication team particularly, whenever something comes, we talk to the people. We have been speaking to the people also, that if they have any problem, they can tell us. 2, 3. You know, there is something called trolling. People do a lot of trolling also. So we take it in the right way, but we have our own troll army. Let me tell you. How is that? We don't pay anybody. It's not that we are doing something illegal. I am saying that we have such dedicated customers now, such dedicated customers who love the service. Somebody writes against Mobus. I am inviting everybody to try for this, and you will have 10 people jumping to defend me. I don't know who they are. I don't know who they are. We are not in touch with them. But we find that if somebody writes against Mobus, people take it very personally and they start defending us. So I don't need to defend myself. People are there to defend us. Fourth, we have also our communication. See, I'll tell you one very interesting thing which other can also try. Like Mobus, our Root, we have two handles. One is open handle, that is Root handle, where we go the official communications. And we have created one, a kind of funny kind of handle, which is Mobi handle. So if there is a serious communication, we use Root handle. If there is something which we cannot really reply, then Mobi gets into action. Mobi handle gives some kind of funny reply, some kind of interesting thing, and because that handle is not a company handle officially, we can be little light there. We can be little, we can take it in a funny way and reply something like. Last thing, we had our last year our first annual function, and Honorable Chief Minister came to our function, and we requested him to travel in Mobus. He agreed to that. Now the question came, who will be traveling with him? Because you need people. You cannot have only the CM and traveling in the bus. So we decided, let us invite the people who have been supporting us on social media, and also some people who have been criticizing us on social media. So we gave a chance to about 20-25 people who were very active on social media, pro and against. Of course, pro were more. So this gave us a very interesting, because see, the people who were criticizing us, they were so happy, they became our followers. They became our supporters. And the people who were criticizing us, who were supporting us, they started supporting us more. So they are very small things, but overall, as I mentioned, I'm telling again that your service ultimately matters. If you have good service, then you can be open to all kinds of communication. But anyhow, a good communication, positive communication is a must, and that always goes in your favor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. That's such a lot of fantastic insights. I'm sure all our cities would be able to learn from this, like the secrets behind the success of Mobus is great. And as we're running short of time, I'm going to come to Gerald very quickly. Gerald, we've had so many conversations, and I've always noticed how from the World Bank, we're very particular about all the technical details of the project. Like let it be IRC guidelines or IRAP. There's always like, is this going to be a part of the project or not? Like those are your questions to us all the time. Now, my question is that does the bank value the need for building support for these projects by engaging with citizens and other key stakeholders? And if so, like how does it nudge the city to take that action? I'd like to hear from you on that one, Gerald.
Okay, thank you, Ashwati. I mean, first, it's good that Mr. Botra's secrets are all recorded on tape now. Everybody can listen to them later on. Very useful. Look, it's very simple. People are at the center of the projects we are designing. Actually, we are rated based on did we deliver for the beneficiaries, and that means surveys, communication, understanding from their perspective. And by understanding from their perspective, I mean all type of people. The children, women, less mobile, etc., need to be considered, and success will be defined. It's part actually of our core process. We have revamped totally our environmental and social safeguard last year, and that created that new framework. Now, I just want to go to what it means in the COVID time. I think in the COVID time, you need to create the champions. You need to create the agents of change, a little bit like what Mr. Botra was mentioning about, his bus advocates, because this is what is going to trigger the long-term transformation, those agents of change beyond a public official or, an IFI or a technical advisor like GIZ. So that creation is what will bring us to the next level. Second, I would say that we need, therefore, to empower the communities. That's what will create that virtuous cycle that Mr. Kumar was mentioning earlier. And that's the next step to implement a lot of pilots a bouquet of pilots, as he said, and make it happen, make people believe it can happen, and see the result and say, yes, that's what we want, because there is a lot of opportunity to do so right now. Thank you. And I would just say, as we close this from our end, it's been a fantastic journey for the World Bank. Very glad to be partnered with ITDP, Smart City, GIZ, and to have conversation with many of you on the side.
Thank you so much, Gerald, and thank you all the speakers and panelists for this fantastic journey. Now, as we come to the end of this session, I'd like to just take a few moments to summarize the conversations that we were having so far. And I think this particular session itself has been extremely insightful. Various key pieces that came out, for example, from Mr. Shashi Verma, who said that the street space is very, very efficient, and it completely depends on whom we prioritize, and that's what is at the heart of this particular change. The secrets that Mr. Botra shared with us, which would be very useful, like the way Mr. Gerald said, for all the cities, because it is recorded as well. And the comments that Rushta had shared as well about how behavioral nudges and changes are very, very integral to this particular transformation, and how and Gerald, your thoughts on the fact that it is the way citizens using these interventions that's actually driving the success of how you look at projects going ahead. So here I would like to pause now, and as we I'd like to do like a very quick closing remarks from everybody, if it could be like a very short closing remark from each of our panelists, if that's fine. Can we go to Mr. Shashi Verma first?
Well, I think, I've said quite a bit today, but I think the only thing I would say is that every crisis is also an opportunity. And we should keep our eyes on how the recovery happens from this in a manner that is sustainable and leads us to the right path in terms of better transport and better cities and better life for all of our citizens.
Thank you so much, Mr. Shashi Verma. Over to you, Mr. Arun Botra, sir.
Ashwathi, one very small thing I can say that communication is an area which is, I think, mostly neglected in very, very many public sector companies, not only in public transport, but in all the companies. I would say that crude, as MD, I can say that 20 to 30% of my success, I can say that safely we can say that it is because of the communication strategies and the way we have kind of have a bond with the people there. So this is one area which people don't really appreciate, understand, and use it. It can be used more often. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you so much, sir. Over to you, Rushta.
Sure, Ashwathi. Just very quickly, this is something that we learned from Tirana again, where they say that it's the critical mass, which is of total saturation of messaging, combined with the underlying infrastructure needs that are met, that feel like it will push, in their instance, cycling into something that is much more sustainable. So the two things, the saturation of messaging and to make sure that the user experience and the infrastructure needs are met is something that I think contributes to what
Fantastic. Gerald?
So I would start with the motto of CRUT. Redefining the way we move is something we can do now. We need champions. We need a lot of sharing of experience. And with that, we can scale and create the belief that it can happen.
Before we close, I'd also like to invite Shreya Gadipalli. Shreya, it would be great if you could share some closing remarks for the entire series itself.
Thanks, Ashwathi. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hey. Thanks. So it's been a fantastic journey, and this came together really quickly. And so I'd like to first thank the Smart Cities mission itself, which was a very willing and supportive partner to make this series happen. They were very actively getting cities to participate, and that's been fantastic. I'd like to thank Gerald, Nupur, and the team from the World Bank for being fantastic partners in this. So thank you, Gerald. And also Laghu and Amik and his team from GIZ, who are not there today, but who were the ones who brought us in touch with Mr. Botra, who's there on the session today. So it's been a fantastic journey for us, and I hope that the participants found it equally useful. And from what we've seen, we've had phenomenal responses, and we've been consistently getting 1,000 registrations for every session, and a lot of participants who are coming in, and also those who are listening to these recordings later. So I'd like to tell everybody that all these are available on, you could come on to ITDP's India's website, ittdp.in/urbanlogue, to see any of these sessions later on in the future. And do keep sending us your comments, your suggestions, because the journey, while for the series comes to an end today, the journey of transformation has just started. And we are really looking forward to all your suggestions and comments and support to make sure that the transformation that now the India Cycles for Change challenge brings about and other such initiatives bring about is dependent on you. So please join us. Make sure that you're supporting your cities in the transformation that India needs. And lastly, I'd like to really commend the work that the whole team at ITDP India has done. So thank you, Ashwati, for being a great leader in getting the Urbanlogue series up and running. Thank you, Shiva. Thank you, Venu. Thank you, Archana. Thank you, Aishwarya, for all the fantastic material that you've been creating for the sessions. Thank you, Aditi and Keshav. You've been consistently sending excellent material down to cities after the sessions are over, the session notes. And thank you everyone else on the team. I might have missed maybe one or two names, but many of you have helped preparing the excellent presentation material that we've had. So this has been a fantastic journey for us. Yeah, let's keep it going.
Thank you so much, Shreya. So we at the team, we had a couple of slides as well, and I'm just going to take a moment to share that with our speakers as well. So again, from the entire team from the entire team of Urbanlogue, the ITDP team, the Smart Cities Mission team, World Bank and GIZ, we would like to thank and highlight that our main motivation and encouragement through this particular series has been our participants. So each one of you, you've continuously intrigued us with each of your questions. With over 5,500 registrations from 180 plus Indian and international cities. And we're thankful to your commitment in ensuring that our cities embrace a green recovery from COVID-19. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank our 30 plus speakers from across the world. From London, Mr. Shashi Varma, thank you so much for taking time off. To Bhuvaneshwar, Mr. Arun Botra, and and all the other speakers from Berlin to Bangalore. It's been like from Mumbai to Singapore. It's been fantastic. And the COVID crisis, in some sense, like sometimes in order to get Mr. Shashi Varma to be on your panel or to get Mr. Arun Botra to be on your panel, it was so difficult in the past. But like every crisis does have a silver lining, and now we can have Rushta, we can have each one of y'all in this conversation with so much more ease, and I hope this continues into the future as well. Next, Archana. I'll take a second to actually thank the entire team at the Smart Cities Mission. We'd like to just share, share them with each one of you as well. So it was fantastic working with Mr. Kunal Kumar, Mr. Rahul Kapoor, Sampath, who has continuously helped us with, the logistics over all of this 6 sessions. Miss Pooja ma'am, it was fantastic. And next, it was great collaborating also with the GIZ team. So Jürgen, Laghu, Amik, Kasinath, and so many more people who really helped us in ensuring that we got all of these fantastic speakers from across the world. The World Bank team, the World Bank team from Gerald and Nupur, like who constantly nudged us about, what the topics of these sessions would be and who would be the right people to ensure that our conversations are engaging and enriching. So thank you, Gerald. Thank you so much for the time that you've been spending with us on this program. And last but not the least, so these are the pillars of our strength. Like each one of them stood behind us. Like so far, it's probably just Shreya and me that the world has been seeing, but they are the entire team that have ensured that this particular program has been a grand success. I'm not going to take the names once again, but each of you all, thank you so much for working with us. And once again, I'd like to thank the participants and thank you all for such a fantastic season. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. It was great.
Thank you, everyone. I'll stay on while all of you log out before I end the meeting for everyone.
So no survey this time.
No survey this time. It's a wrap. So that's all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gerald. Thank you so much, everyone, for being on this panel. Thank you, participants. And that's a wrap from us.